Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. And as we delve into this week's topic, a reminder that some of the content may be of a sensitive nature. Now, here's your hosts, Tim and Des.
Welcome to this week's Momentum. It is so good to have you tuning in, and actually I'm super excited for the show. We'll get to that in just a moment. Des, how are you this week, my friend?
Always fantastic.
Wow.
So when you get to my age, every day is a good day. So
it's a gift.
So good. No, really good. Really good. I love doing this with Tim. It's a real pleasure to be able to serve God in this way and serve men in this way. And while I've sort of got the air, don't forget, guys, our website, momentumaustralia.org, all our previous podcasts on there, links to YouTube, links to YouTube videos that will help you on your journey in all the areas that we cover. So don't forget our website, momentumaustralia.org, and also our care line. You know, we were amazed to get this number, 1-800-000-MEN. Even men can remember that number. And so when you're doing life tough and you're on your own and you need a safe and confidential conversation, guys, remember 1-800-000-MEN 636. And, you know, that's available from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week. Just go for it, guys. Bring it to your heart's content.
You know, every day there are multiple opportunities for us to have people speak into our lives, our wives, husbands, kids, boss, work colleagues, friends, etc., etc. There's no shortage of opportunities for us to be able to receive feedback from others. And I use the term feedback lovingly.
So the key is, of course, how do we handle this feedback? And it's crucial in terms of whether it changes us or leaves us the way we are. Not only in terms of retaining friendship and relationship, but also in terms of growing as an individual person.
Yeah. So how do we handle feedback with maturity to potentially make our relationship stronger and us personally better people?
To help us out, we're joined on this week's show by author, educator, award-winning speaker. Man, that's a mouthful. Michelle Mitchell is joining us today. Welcome, Michelle.
Hey, it is so great to be here. I live with 3 blokes, and just to be around them is a privilege, but now to be in a wider community of men, this is the real honor. So thanks, guys.
Michelle, we are absolutely thrilled to have you stepping into the Momentum space. And just for a quick backstory for those who don't know, Michelle and I first met when I was in radio a few years back, and we would have weekly conversations on the air. And Michelle has got so much, a wealth of wisdom that we can pull on today. And given that we know that women tune into Momentum as well, we thought, hey, let's start bringing some female voices into the show. And this lady's got a lot to offer. If you want to find out a bit more about Michelle, michellemitchell.org. And of course, you're going to hear from her over the next half an hour or so. So without further ado, let's jump in, Michelle. Lots of opportunity for people to speak into our lives, right? Let's look at some generic things, and then we're going to nail it down to husbands, wives, because this is a biggie for marriage, let's be honest. But specifically, you know, things that can put a strain on marriage, that sort of thing. But let's talk about the importance of feedback in general, right? Because let's be honest, this is a tricky space. We don't necessarily like feedback at times, but why is it helpful? Why is it helpful to have that feedback?
We're a social species, so we can't get a realistic gauge of who we are without feedback. So on our own, we'll probably get an overinflated idea of ourselves or an underinflated idea of ourselves.
Right.
What we really need is a realistic gauge of ourselves. So I always say, particularly for kids, we've got this love-hate pull with feedback. We need it, but we also hate it because it pricks us. And if we understand that feedback is all about growth and self-awareness, I think it gives us the weight that it deserves. I think in the female world, we throw around feedback like it's nothing, like, oh, I love your outfit, or what'd you do to your hair this time? And we even comment on each other's personal lives without thinking about it too much. But I think in blokes' world, they just don't go there. They really understand that feedback can sting, and they don't put themselves out there unless they're asked as much. So I think there is a real difference between how we give feedback within female relationships and maybe male relationships. There's a little bit more caution with it. And I think the first thing we need to understand is it does carry weight. And oftentimes that weight isn't really appreciated in the way that it needs to be. Feedback equals growth, and that can be stretching. It can be painful.
So, Michelle, is it related to me? I've heard it said that feedback is only as important as the person who's giving you the feedback. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I guess if your heart is open to that person, it always is going to carry more weight. But I think it's a bit of a misconception to think that even if we don't highly value someone's feedback, we're not going to think about it. I mean, I think that some people have the capacity to let feedback go a little bit quicker than other people do. But I don't think there's many people who don't ponder on someone's negative comments. I don't quite remember the exact stats, but I think there's quite a lot of positive comments that are needed to outweigh someone's negative comments. Yeah, we all have that negative bias. So if someone says one thing negative, or we see one thing negative on social media, we tend to grab towards that negative thing as well.
Just for the record, backtracking to what you said, I've never commented on what Des has done with his hair. Just to clarify that, and for obvious reasons. But I appreciate that.
I think about how you feel and what feedback you're going to give me every time I shave my head.
But I want to just step back because I think this is setting the scene, right?
God, Tim, so many guys give feedback in the form of banter as well,
yes.
don't they? Like, it is so different.
I just give feedback without knowing it.
That's great. In other words, Des, you've got no hair. Like, it's
But I mean, that's anyway, the pot calling the kettle. Anyway, choosing to engage in feedback, right? And I love when you said this, Michelle, when we were prepping for this. Choosing to engage in feedback is choosing to engage in self-awareness and growth. This is brave work, right? Feedback is an invitation to growth. But I mean, for a lot of us, the truth is we will get feedback and it will sting and we'll want to shove our walls up and not take it. But if we can sit with that stuff, it's people giving you an opportunity to go, I see this. Here's maybe a blind spot, or here's something that I see that you're not maybe aware of, or did you know that, when this happens, or you say this, or you act like this, or whatever. I mean, that is a brave space, and particularly for guys and our egos, let's be honest, that's a brave space for us to step into.
And let's dig into that a little bit more. It's the emotion, or it's the sting that's the invitation for us to use courage and recognize that that's the growth moment. So it's the awareness. It's the emotional awareness in that moment that's the invitation for growth. So it's us being able to tap into that emotion and being aware of that emotion. That's the piece.
It's huge.
And so in terms of the tone and the delivery of feedback, that's sort of key too. Because some people can be really nasty when they're giving feedback, and maybe have the right intention, but the tone is confrontational, or it's negative, or whatever. So there's lots of ways around that, isn't there?
I think especially our young boys too, they've gotten feedback from a whole range of sources through their lives, maybe teachers, principals, sports coaches. I've seen sport coaches berate boys and give them feedback about their performance that has just made my hair stand on end. Maybe mums nagging their kids as well. Let's face it, wives, like within our romantic relationships as well, sometimes we don't give feedback very well. And this is something that I just think is really, really important. I think we live in a world that is bombarding, particularly our kids, but I think even as adults, we are bombarded with way too much feedback, and it's almost sensory overload. It is, it's too much to take on all at once. And I think what happens when we get overwhelmed with too much feedback, we tend to just put our hands up in the air and go, I can't be perfect. I can't do all this, so I'm going to do nothing. And I know as a wife, I've actually had to be really intentional about how I've set up these conversations with my husband. If I've got something to give him feedback on, I've had to really ask myself, whose benefit is this for? Is this important enough for me to open my mouth about or not? And with my boys as well. And I've actually had to ask for their permission or their consent and ask them, is it okay if I give you feedback about this? Especially if it's something significant, right? If it's the stuff that needs to go in the dishwasher, that's a different story. But if it's something that's significant, the setup is so important. And this is where trust comes in. And I think you really did allude to this, Des, before. We've got to really have each other's back. And I think it's really important in the setup to really say, hey, babe, I've got no other intention right now, but maybe to illuminate something or shed light on something that might be a blind spot for you. Would it be okay if I have a bit of a weighty conversation with you? Can I give you feedback on this? And if you say no, I'm not going to say one word about it. But if you say yes, I want you to know that I'm going to tread lightly because I know this is going to be prickly for you. But also I want you to know that as a wife, I want to have your back and I want to be here for you. And sometimes my husband has said to me, just give me a minute to think about that. Because he knows once he says yes, it's coming.
There's something heavy coming.
Yeah. And then in those moments, you know, then once he said yes, sometimes it's taken him 2 days to say yes. And then once we're having that conversation, and even in that conversation, I guess there's stages. And sometimes he said to me, I need to opt out now. And can we pick this up again soon? And there's such a lot of patience that needs to be had on the other end of somebody else's growth. This is not about me. This is not about me getting my 2 cents worth out. This is not about me unloading or unpacking my frustration. This is actually about his growth right now. This is actually about him. And there's an ideal image that we all struggle to let go of. And when you're giving someone feedback, they're often holding an ideal image of themselves that they're really struggling to let go of.
Wow.
And we're triggering some pretty painful things in people's lives.
Honestly, that last 3 minutes, in all seriousness, Michelle, whether it's from a female perspective or even a male perspective, there'll be men listening.
That's right.
Some of them will feel really angry with what you've just said because they're like, that's not my experience. And man, I've been trying to tell my wife this for years. Some will be really sad because they feel like they don't have that. And they feel like they've just been nagged for the last 50 years. You know what I mean? Like, and anything in between, because what you just said there, that approach that you came with, and we'll unpack that, I think, a bit more in the second part of the show when we talk about marriage specifically. But if for both of us, both parties, if we can adopt that approach, whether it's male, female, it doesn't matter. Whether your husband or wife, doesn't matter. I've seen some stuff here that I'd love to talk to you about. Are you okay to have that conversation? Because a lot of us don't even ask permission, let's be honest. We just launch out from frustration or anger, disappointment, whatever it is. We've had our expectation let down once again. And I'm going to tell you because I'm right and this is da-da-da-da. And then we go, well, hold on. There's no way that's going to be received well. But the way that you came in with that, hey, I love you and I'm for you. I'm not here to hurt you. But I've seen some stuff here that might actually help you and ultimately help us as a marriage.
And do you trust me enough in this moment? And that can change from season to season in a marriage. Let's face it, over 30 years, we've been married now. Like, some seasons are easier than others. Do you trust me now in this moment to give you this feedback? And if the answer is no, do I have the character to shut up?
Yeah. To back off. Absolutely.
That's going to communicate to my husband that he can trust me to hold my word. Yeah,
that's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
That's so powerful. We're going to just leave that as a mic drop moment and take a short break on Momentum and come back and talk about, we're talking about handling feedback with maturity. This is an incredible conversation. I hope you're enjoying it with Michelle Mitchell. MichelleMitchell.org is her website. MomentumAustralia.org is our website. We're going to take a short break and come back with Michelle in just a tick. Stay tuned.
This is Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at MomentumAustralia.org.
If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. Or text 0401 132 888.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at MomentumAustralia.org.
Welcome back to part 2 of this week's Momentum. Appreciate you coming back. It's been a great first part to the show with Michelle Mitchell. MichelleMitchell.org is her website. Michelle is, now, how did we label you, Michelle? An author, educator, award-winning speaker, but she's got a whole bunch of wisdom that we're drawing out from her this week as we talk about handling feedback with maturity. We're talking marriage here because let's be honest, giving feedback in a marriage can either make or break a marriage, right? And the way that we do that, we handle our partner in that moment of giving feedback. Even if it's warranted and necessary, the way that we do it can either really hurt them and cause a distance, or it can bring us together and keep the relationship sound. So some thoughts about, for the men listening right now, needing to approach their wife about something in their life. Some thoughts about how we do that to bring something to them so that we can bring it in a way that she can receive.
Okay. Before I start, let me just give a practical, just little bit of information before I head into a story. This stuff applies to our children as well. So just flip it when it comes to talking to our kids. It's the idea of not giving feedback that's, substantial unless asked. And if it's absolutely necessary, especially with our kids, can I give you some feedback sometime within the next 24 hours when would suit you? So trying to give them some choice and ownership within it. So we're not just pouncing, because I don't know about you, but arguments break out in my home when everyone starts to give each other feedback without asking.
It's life,
that's what
isn't
an argument is. It's just everyone just lobs in with feedback. That's basically an argument. So, Tim, I think your question was, when was a time where your husband gave you feedback? My husband's from North Queensland. And I guess talking about talking about emotions is never been his strong point, and he won't mind me saying that, right? And he's very protective of me, I guess, emotionally, because I think that he doesn't like to feel emotions in a deep way. He's got a very even temperament. And I think he's emotionally protective of me. And when he's ever got to speak to me about something that he thinks might hurt me, he is very sensitive about it. He doesn't like to dump on me emotionally. And whereas that's great, it sometimes limits maybe addressing some of the heavy issues in relationships. And we did go through a patch in our marriage where he needed to talk to me about some things that were on the heavier side, and he was struggling. And it was struggling because he didn't want to hurt me. And I kept saying to him, babe, I know you love me. And I was trying to say to him, do what I do with you. Tell me, darling, I love you and I've got your back. And I'm saying this because I want our marriage to be stronger. But for him, that wasn't easy for him to do. And so I said to him, what's going to make it easy for you to give me the feedback or address the things that you need to address with me? And so we decided together it would be easier for him if we went to see a counsellor and we talked about it with someone else in the room. Because I'll tell you why. He needed someone to ask and prompt his thoughts and feelings and give him the permission to be completely honest. Did I find one word that came out of his mouth offensive? No. Did I find one word that came out of his mouth hurtful? No. I could have finished his sentences. I knew exactly what he was thinking and feeling. I'd been married to the bloke for 25 years then. But for him, getting that out of his heart and out into the world was hard, and he needed help to do that. And so that was helpful for us.
Let's stay with the marriage piece though, Michelle, because I want to continue to explore that, because I think, again, there's many men listening now who, well, let's be honest, communication in marriage is one of the biggest challenges, right? And that's where often marriages break down. So you mentioned at the end of the first part of the show about how to approach the husband. And we painted this scenario there about guys wanting to approach their wife, but wife may be volatile and whatever. I suppose it's the generic thought around when my partner is trying to bring something or wanting to bring something to me. Yes, the way it's brought is important, but how I respond is important too. So I suppose let's kind of unpack that a little bit too, because we can either negate what's being said by the way that we respond, or we can inflame what's been said by the way we respond. So maybe let's unpack some of that.
Well, it's really good. Okay. So when someone gives you feedback, we've got to understand that we are then going to tell ourselves a story about what they're saying to us. So we are going to overlay that with our own story. So what it's so important to do that when someone gives us feedback, we check in and make sure that we're hearing it correctly. So many times I've given my husband feedback, or he's given me feedback, and I've said, so you're saying to me that I'm blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying at all. Because what it's doing is triggering our deepest fears, our deepest insecurities, moments in our lives where we haven't measured up, where we've heard something similar but, different. And it's attaching to our wounds that we had as a child, as a teenager. And that story can be inaccurate, outdated, and we cannot be hearing the feedback accurately.
Wow.
And I think that right there takes time. And I think in our busy schedules, if we're really wanting to hear feedback from our partner in a way that is accurate, we need to make sure that we allow ourselves the time to not just hear it, but hear it accurately. And don't think that's going to happen in 5 minutes. Hour chat, but maybe 2 or 3 day hour chats, really, if it's something significant.
I mean, that right there that's part of the bigger picture, right? I mean, that what you just said is huge, because let's be honest, we all have stories or filters that we're viewing life through, or feedback through, or whatever it may be, and telling ourselves what we think that actually means. And that's, I think, part of the problem in marriage is that, again, it's not necessarily the person standing in front of you. It's the stuff in the backstory that we haven't cleaned up, dealt with, healed from. Like you said, it's triggering the open wounds, and it just happens to be that it's now my spouse in front of me that's bringing that to me and triggering that thing, which is why when we started this conversation in the first part of the show, you talked about feedback is an invitation into growth. Often this is not even about what's happening here and now. It's about the stuff in the backstory that I actually haven't dealt with or healed from.
And this is where you give someone feedback, and then you have to be patient with what happens afterwards.
Right.
Give someone feedback, and then this is the feedback you gave. This is what I heard, which is different than what you gave. And this is what it triggered in me. And this is what I've now got to deal with. This is the story I've now got to deal with. This is what's outdated, and this is what I've got to refine, and this is what we've got to sort of, deal with and talk through. And that can take, a few weeks. That can take a few months. That can be a bit of an ongoing process. But that can be like, hey, my dad always told me I was this, and you've just told me I'm this as well. Now that just unpacks it's almost like opening the vault.
Yeah.
You've got to have some patience with that process. And then I think you need to make it so practical. Okay, so honey, let's just take this a step at a time. What next? I'm
just thinking of this whole defensiveness piece. You could see something written on my face, because I'm thinking that initially for either party, we could get defensive, right? The story that brings up, the trigger that hits, is so profoundly upsetting for us, or too much in that moment, that we just get defensive. We shut it down, and we shut down the conversation. And then whether that's I'm trying to have a conversation with my wife, she just shuts down, or vice versa. I'm trying to have a conversation with my husband, he's too whatever, it just shuts down, walks off, whatever. Because I think that's one of our biggest problems, is it's either it just gets volatile, or it gets the opposite, where it's defensive and it just gets shut down. If
our listeners can identify within themselves that defensiveness is the thing that is a wedge in their relationship, and they can become aware that this is something that is getting in the way of this process, just that awareness itself, and taking that idea that I am becoming defensive and it's a problem, taking that to a safe space and starting to unpack that and saying what's happening in that moment and asking themselves the question is, why am I feeling so defensive? What am I telling myself in that moment? Why am I feeling so afraid? Because the truth is, defensiveness is just a way that we have kept ourselves safe through our lives.
Wow.
That is exactly what it is. It is a safety mechanism. And if we can be brave enough to actually start to unpack that with someone who we trust, maybe away from our partner for a minute, and we can actually start to become more and more aware of it, then we can actually start to let that thing have less and less power and maybe start to become more vulnerable to be able to allow someone's feedback to come into our lives and trust our partners just a bit more.
Now you understand why we were keen to get Michelle on the show. What an absolutely powerful conversation we've just had. We've been talking with Michelle Mitchell about handling feedback with maturity. If you want to check out Michelle's website and find out more about her, michellemitchell.org. And of course, we'll have this show up on our website, momentumaustralia.org, and of course the podcast spaces too. Michelle, an absolutely profound conversation. Encourage the guys to go back and have a listen to this one. There's a lot in that. And thank you for being with us today on Momentum.
It's my pleasure. What a joy. Thank you.
You've been listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. For more information or to hear this week's show again, go to momentumaustralia.org. You can also access a whole range of resources to help you on your journey and to get in touch with the team at momentumaustralia.org. Until next time, keep moving forward with Momentum.